Morning to all. And we're going to continue the Simcha thing. So we did all the simple stuff, right? Happy from stuff. We did the more psychological stuff, I guess, or spiritual stuff. And now we'll do the religious stuff. It's not an exact division, but it'll nevertheless, it'll serve our purposes. So we're holding number 11, right? We talked about the joy of a drunkard, the joy of a taker, the joy of a giver, the joy of food and drink, the joy of wine and meat, the joy of being samech mechalke, the joy from wisdom, the joy from victory, the joy from clarity, the joy from the future, and how joy engenders humility. We're holding number 11 or 12. It's number 11 in your stack. Omer Dovid HaMelech. This is wonderful. Dovid HaMelech says, Ani yareisi mitech simchasi. When I was in a very joyous state, I had yira. V'simachti mitech yirasi. When I was in a very awed state, I had joy. Verstehst? You understand? You get it? When I was very, very happy, I kept my head. When I was very, very earnest, I didn't lose my energy. That's how you translate this in simple words. When a person is very, very happy, they can get loose, right? When people are very, very happy, they can get a little bit frivolous. And Dovid HaMelech says, when I was in a state of incredible joy, I had an aspect of yira. The best example for this, I think, is the story with Yaakov Avinu. That Yaakov Avinu meets Yosef HaTzadik. Could there be a greater moment than the moment of Yaakov Avinu meets Yosef HaTzadik? Yaakov Avinu loved Yosef more than any of his other children. And he had a bias towards him which almost cost Yosef his life, right? We all know he loved him dearly. And then Yosef HaTzadik vanishes. And Yaakov Avinu was unconsolable. And Rashi says the reason he's unconsolable is because Yosef is still alive and Ein Makabel Tanchumen Alachayim. There's a fascinating idea brought in Torah, which is called Shechina. Sometimes forgetting is good. You imagine the people who went through the Holocaust, who didn't have the ability to block it out, they would not have been able to live, right? People do that. Psychologically, when something is too hard for you, you block it out. Today in psychotherapy, they help you bring it out because of the obstacles that it creates in your life going forward. But that's a luxury. If you came out of the Holocaust, you wanted to just live. You blocked it out. Yaakov Avinu could not block out Tzaras Yosef because Yosef was still alive. So for 22 years he's tormented. For 22 years he can't find peace. Take one of these. And then Yosef was alive. And he goes to see him. And Yosef HaTzadik, who's the king, the vizier, the vice king in Mitzrayim, harnesses his own horse, attaches it to his own wagon, and goes out to greet his father in the outskirts of Goshen or wherever it was, by Klein Shlita. And he hugs him and he kisses him and he cries. And Yaakov Avinu was limp. With Rashi's help, of course. Yosef HaTzadik falls on his father, he hugs him, he kisses him and he cries. And Yaakov doesn't respond. Says Rashi, why not? Yaakov Avinu is saying Krishma. At the moment of the maximum of joy, Yaakov Avinu is saying Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. That's the meaning of Ani Yareisi Mitech Simchasi. When a person has unbelievable simcha, there needs to be awe. Because, we talked about this in an earlier discussion. When we had a conversation on Thursday nights about Yarmulkes. The American concept of freedom. Freedom is one of the greatest gifts God gave man. Maybe the greatest. But freedom doesn't mean I can act like an animal. Freedom means I'm responsible for myself. We wear a yarmulke literally as a harness. That's why I say yarmulke should be made of lead, not of silk or leather. Because the yarmulke is God. Yarmulke on your head means I can't do whatever I want. God is above me. Like I gave you the illustration that Zalman Garari, Olav HaShalom, he was the Manal, he was the principal of the high school in the 1940s. And he was really not made to be principal for American boys because he wasn't American at all. He was very unreasonable. I told you, he'd see the balls, the kids, high school kids, playing ball, he'd confiscate the balls, and then 5 minutes later they had another ball. He'd confiscate the ball 5 minutes later. He found out later that his nemesis was the Rebbe's Nechamadina. She went to the store, she bought a whole bunch of balls, and when she saw the rabbi take the ball away, she threw another one. So the Zalman Garari told to the Frierdiker Rebbe, what am I supposed to do? The Frierdiker says, you must let him play. You must let him play. But you have to supervise them. Why? They shouldn't scream like Americans scream. Frei is not freedom. It's of keres, it's frivolousness. And the yarmulke represents it. The yarmulke is supposed to remind us, Hashem, I'm a Jew, I'm free. But my freedom is not wild. My freedom has a direction, has a spirit, has a purpose. And that's the meaning of ani yarei simcha simcha. At the moment of maximum joy, a person needs a containment. The containment is called yira. Go ahead.
So is there a real big point of yalka if it doesn't remind you 100%, not 100%, 95%?
How many mitzvahs do we do and lack kavanah? How many mitzvahs do we do with kavanah? Almost all of them. So should we not do them?
Minhag that was created?
Every minhag, once it's created, becomes a halacha. The Alter Rebbe paskins that for a man, walking around without a yarmulke is the opposite of tznius. Simply because it's become the habit of covering our head. Oh boy. I got a secret for you, Ari. You know if that's you can do whatever you want. This is America. You can do whatever you want. Don't do it reluctantly. It's so bad.
No.
Embrace it. In other words, if I don't want to be yarmulke, and I never have to, but I'm finding out a little tashtikal heter, that's bad. I relate to the yarmulke. I understand what the yarmulke means. In other words, like I told one of the chavos once, you want to do an aveda, do it with your yarmulke on. Keep your yarmulke on. Yeah, but I'm doing an aveda. Keep yarmulke on. You'll have guilt. A yarmulke is God. A yarmulke is Hashem. And one of the instances where the yarmulke plays out, the person is very, very happy. The yarmulke reminds that there's an Eibishter. It's the meaning of the words, ani yaresi mitoich simchasi. Then he says, v'simachti mitoich yirasi. There are times that a person is very odd. Yom Kippur, when you're doing tshuva, when people are very, very, very focused or intense or earnest for whatever reason, in the middle of that is simcha. To use the lashon of the pasuk, which is so often cited in Chassidus, v'gilu bir'ada. What's the trademark of the Yom Ne'erai? What are you doing on Seres Yemei Tshuva? Yir'ada means you're shaking out of fear. Gilu bir'ada. In that fear, there needs to be a little bit of joy. In other words, there's a context to everything. Even when I'm in a very earnest state, and I'm in an earnest state in my relationship to the Eibishter, in my connection to the Eibishter, I'm in an earnest state. Meaning that I'm involved with Hashem, and because I'm involved with Hashem, I'm very, very, very serious. I can smile. I can smile not because the earnestness is diminished, but because, I guess you can say it on two levels. On a simple level, because I'm still a person. I'm thinking in my head a story, but I can't remember the details of the story. How Rabbi Khan describes the first year's mamish, when the Rebbe blew shofar. B'chlal, when the Rebbe blew shofar, the Rebbe was very earnest. When the Rebbe first became a Rebbe, the earnestness on his face was frightening. He'd become so serious, you're afraid to be near him. And how in the middle of all of that earnestness, something silly happened and the Rebbe smiled. He didn't stop being a person. So on a very, very simple level, it means that no matter how earnest you become, there's still space. I don't want to say comic relief, but the idea, the proof that this earnestness is real is that it's not so heavy that I'm not a person anymore. There is joy even at the maximum moment of earnestness. On a deeper level, on a more religious level, V'gila b'rada means I'm always in Eibishter's hands. Now, we have responsibilities, we have obligations, the things that we need to do. And our responsibilities, our obligations are very serious. And our mistakes, we have accountability for. Someone's going to come to me tomorrow, next week, next month, like, yeah, why did you do this? In all of this, we remember that we're not alone. We have the Eibishter, and therefore there's room for a little joy. The joy is not necessarily taking away from the earnestness. The joy is simply reminding us that we're living in the Eibishter's world. To use the example that the Rebbe would give often, is that you have to do tshuva mitoich simcha. You have to do tshuva with joy. I knew a Jew. His name was Rabbi Chaim Ruben, Allah Shalom, Lichting Ganeg. He was the rabbi of a shul called Beth Dovid Gershon. Beth Dovid Gershon is across the street from the police station. If you don't know where the police station is, it means two things. A, you don't live in Crown Heights. B, you've never gotten into trouble. The police station is on New York and Empire. It's in the corner near my house. And directly to the police station, there's a shul, an old shul, an Ashkenaz shul, called Beth Dovid Gershon. Rabbi Ruben was the rabbi. He's now deceased. He's now passed away. And he used to talk to me a lot, and I feel very honored. He taught me a lot of things. And one of the things he told me was his tenant was Dovid Raskin. He lived in the same house as Dovid Raskin. He was the landlord, Agreisa Oishet, and Dovid Raskin was his tenant. So when he lost his father, when Rabbi Reuben's father was a Rebbe, was a Goy ben a Yid, a special Jew, maybe even Madreget Tzad. He was a Jew from the old country. When Rabbi Reuben's father passed away in 1979, the Rebbe sent Rabbi Dovid Raskin to be Menachem Ovel to console him on his behalf with a message. And the message was that every time a Jew does a mitzvah, he does it mitoich simcha. Sitting shiva is a mitzvah, so you have to sit shiva mitoich simcha. Now exactly, first of all, sitting shiva is not a mitzvah, it's midrabanan. Right? What is the mitzvah of sitting shiva? The answer is very simple. The mitzvah of sitting shiva is simcha. It's tshuva. Because the halacha is, when somebody dies, you have to take stock, right? When somebody in your group passes away, I have a friend, mamish a friend, a classmate, who died. Now, I'm not going to say I did a head over heels. It's incredibly sobering. A young man, when he passed away, he was 56 years old. He left, relatively speaking, young children in Almona. One of them happens to have a birthday today. It sobers you. It reminds you of your own mortality. You know, as much as we want to not believe it, we don't live forever. Now, this doesn't mean you walk around the whole day being afraid. It means you have to, when something severe happens, you look at your life and you say, I got to take my time seriously, because the time isn't endless. You don't have bli gvul zman. You have a limited amount of time, and you have to use every moment. And that's why Avelis is tshuva. Avelis is a moment where something happens which makes you take stock of your life and be more focused on your life. So it's a mitzvah, it's tshuva. If it's tshuva, you have to do it b'simcha. Then of course, how do you be sad happy? Tshuva means I did something wrong and I have to fix it. So exactly, what's the joy? The answer is very simple. The joy is that I could do tshuva. The simcha is, I messed up, right? Hashem gave me a relationship with Him. And I messed up in the relationship and I can fix it. So I'm not happy about the fact that I messed it up. I'm not happy about the fact that I need to fix something that I broke. I'm happy about the opportunity. And that's the meaning of the word, simachti miteich yirasi. At the moment of maximum yira, I'm in awe and in fear. There's place for a joke. There's place for a laugh. There's place for simcha. And on a very, very simple practical level, everybody knows this. When people are under a lot of pressure, for whatever reasons, they're afraid of something, or there's a deadline, whatever the case is, or a due date, whatever the case is, right? Comic relief helps. Simcha. At moments of maximum earnestness, you need to calm down. It's a good tazach. It doesn't mean that you're going to take away from the earnestness, just put a balance on it. And this balance, I would argue, comes from the Eibishter. To be happy at an earnest moment, or to be earnest at a very happy moment, comes from the fact that you realize that there's something higher than you that puts balance in everything in your life. And that's what David HaMelech is saying. I rejoiced in fear and I had trepidation with my joy. When I was at a moment of maximum simcha, I had an earnestness, and at a moment of maximum simcha, I had a yira. I love this quote. I think it's a really, really good way to live. That the worst situations are not that bad, and the best situations are not infinity. Those two ideas are being communicated here in this here number 11 or 12. Questions or comments?
Wait, so you're saying the reason for Avelis has nothing to do with actually mourning?
Of course it does. It absolutely does. And it's a din. It's a chiyuv. Just like a whole time a person has to be besimcha, when the person loses an immediate relative, they're mechuyev to be a novel. They have to be sad. They're not allowed to be happy. But the sadness isn't only mourning, which is really a very selfish thing. The sadness has a lesson. When the Rebbe lost his wife, the Rebbe lost Chaya Mushka, from the first minute he made a new mantra in Chabad called V'achai yiten elibe. The living should take the heart. It's a pasuk in Mishlei. The living should take the heart. In other words, death is a part of life. And in a perfect world, death is a beautiful thing. And people live long and healthy, and they have family around them, and they pass away, yeah. But there's halachas of Avelis. The halachas of Avelis and mourning include stock taking. It's a time that you're not allowed to do anything, and you examine yourself. That self-examination is tshuva. So it's not, the Avelis is Avelis. But the Avelus has along with it a tshuva. This is not halacha. Today's a fast day. And the Rambam writes that we fast because of tragedies that occurred to us, but we're not fasting because of Avelus. We're fasting because of the tshuva. So the Rambam paskins that every fast day is an eis ratzon, and we fast as the means of doing tshuva, because when people don't eat, they're more vulnerable. They have a bad taste in their mouth, and their stomach is rumbling, and they're irritated. Under those conditions, a person's in a position where they're likely able to be more honest about their iniquities, as it were. Anybody else? Number 12. Ein hashchida sheda ela mitoich simcha. This is mamish ruchnius. It's a lukus. The Schechina will not rest without joy. This is an axiom. If you want to be close to God, you got to let go of yourself. You want to let go of yourself, you got to be happy. It's so simple. There is nothing more self-absorbing than sadness and depression. There is nothing more selfish than self-pity. And there's nothing more selfless, nothing more self-forgetting than being happy. Nobody's life is perfect. There's no such thing. No one has a life where their life by itself gives them happiness. Sometimes you're happy because you emphasize one part of your life, but everybody's got stuff. You know, this is the cliche that's been going around forever and ever, right? What's the difference between your tzaras and my tzaras? Or they say in Yiddish, what's the difference between your pekel and my pekel? Only one thing. My pekel I know. I know what's going on in my life. I know my problems. Yeah, I don't know yours. But everybody has problems. There's no such thing as life without problems. But life is supposed to be lived with the problems. In other words, you're not supposed to wait for the problems to go away to start living. That's called the American dream. And the American dream is a nightmare. It's just not true. Life is not perfect. And if a person is always waiting for life to be perfect, they're always going to be unhappy. They're always going to be needy. If a person is able to stop thinking about themselves, then they can live. And this forgetting about yourself comes from accepting the life you have. And that's a form of simcha. Joy, happiness. But happiness, this forgetting about yourself, which allows you to be happy, has within itself a built-in property of humility, as we discussed yesterday in number 10 on this page, or number 11 on this page. Simcha. Joy engenders humility. When a person is happy, they're not thinking about themselves. Or to say it backwards, you can't be happy so long as you're busy thinking about yourself. The prerequisite to meeting God is getting over yourself. In other words, what stands in the way of our intimacy with Hashem is ourselves. What's standing between me and God is me. If I get me out of the way, there's room for the Eibishter. It makes sense. It's logical. There's a lot of levels in this. I'll tell you the story that's been going around. It's a great story. It's a wonderful story. That a younger man, one of the Lubavitch's best public speakers, was traveling for public speaking, and he came to a particular Chabad house, which was a house full of Mishagoyim. It's just normal is crazy over there. If you're normal, you're crazy. If you're crazy, you're normal. Everything is relative. And there was a guy there who had a shtick that he'd been doing for many, many years. And because of his shtick, he had come to meet the Rebbe before Gimel Tammuz. What was his shtick? His shtick was he hated religion. And he hated clergy. Anybody who was an important rabbi, important galach, important imam, he had to go and find his truth. Show him that he's full of it. This was his thing, you know. So he would show up, he would follow important people, he'd find them, he'd track them down, and he'd hang out with them, and when they'd get up to speak in public, or whatever the case was, he would sit in front of them and stare at them, and look at them, and look at them, and he would unnerve them. That was his thing, which is not hard to do. You can do it to anybody. So he showed up at 770, and he got in the front row. It's not hard to get in the front row, just come 15 minutes early, you got a good spot. The Rebbe David Maidev, the Rebbe turns around to talk, and he's staring at the Rebbe. He's staring at the Rebbe. And the Rebbe looks back at him, and he looks away. It's very, very hard to understand this. I know that you didn't have this experience, but I did. You couldn't look in the Rebbe's eyes.
My shver has a mindset that he was like, was upset, he was going to show that he was going to look at the Rebbe, and he's like, felt the partial he would die.
Your shver?
Yeah. He was upset. The Bachar, he came to Israel, and he decided he wanted to look at the Rebbe, and he wanted the Rebbe to look back at him, and he wasn't going to break eye contact and tell the Rebbe how angry he was.
Angry about what?
Whatever it was, I don't know.
Your shver's like a holy man.
Yeah, it doesn't say what it was, but he just says he tried to steer.
It was impossible.
He says I felt like I thought it was going to explode. It was going to die in a second.
The Rebbe looked at him. Okay, look back.
In the crowd, it was far.
Yeah. The Rebbe's eyes were like,
Let's see you try.
yeah. So this guy comes 770 and he's staring at the Rebbe. And the Rebbe's not looking at him, the Rebbe's looking around. The Rebbe looks at him, he looks away. He said, wait, this is wrong. So he tries again. He eventually figured out this is a different kind of rabbi. This is a different kind of rabbi. This is the real deal. So he never became frum, but the Rebbe was on a pedestal. You know, he hated all religion, he hated all clergy, but the Rebbe was the real thing. So he was a Chabad of Malibu. So a guy comes to speak and he's really, really good. And at some point, this is Meshuggah for the back. The rabbi says, your speeches are amazing. You got to get out of the way. We want to hear the Rebbe. You got to get out of the way. You want to hear the Rebbe. It's a great story. We are in the way between ourselves and our relationship with the Eibishter. And when you say we, it means a lot of things. On the lowest levels, it's our worries, it's our fear, it's our anxiety, it's our needs, it's our jealousies. All of these things hold us back very close to the Eibishter. If we can get over all of these things, and sometimes it's very hard, sometimes maybe even be impossible, we allow ourselves to have a different kind of relationship with Hashem because we're not creating all these blockages, all of these obstacles between us and a relationship with the Eibishter. Now understand, this Piskom, Eina Schechina Shoira El Metech Simcha, is talking about a Navi. It's talking about Ruach HaKodesh, it's talking about holy people. But in a small way, in a microcosm, it applies to each one of us. Each one of us can get closer to the Eibishter if we can get over ourselves. And it's so interesting because the age in which we're living is incredibly psychology-centric. The truth of the matter is that our involvement in psychology is a luxury. Like I said to you before, yeah? A person came from the Holocaust. He could do psychotherapy. He could do psychoanalysis to take out the trauma of the Holocaust to be able to live a healthy life. He couldn't do that. He'd never finish. He had to live. He had to shut it down and go. And all the neuroses, all the mishagas, he passed along to his kids. The kids are all cuckoo. But they were born. They were alive. There's somebody here to fix it. Somebody once told me it could take 5 generations for people to get out, to expunge the psychological damage from the Holocaust, which is fascinating. It's interesting. We live in an age where people are very aware of their feelings, and everyone is trying to heal. Well, you don't understand that for most of history, you couldn't afford it. If you're hungry, yeah, you can't think about your feelings. You got to find bread. If you're cold, you have to find firewood. We live in an age where our lives are so, the right word is rich. The word we prefer to use, so comfortable that we're able, and because we're able, we're forced. In other words, we can't avoid it, to deal with the kind of mental health sensitivities that in a different time you just, if this brought you down, it killed you. You couldn't live. So if you survived, you just didn't deal with it and you lived your life. That's how it was. But all the psychology is very selfish. Psychology is being busy with self. And I'm not saying a person shouldn't engage in it. But I am saying that a person should, let me put it to you this way, there's no such thing as a psychology lifestyle. Said in other words, still, a psychology lifestyle means I never stop thinking about me. Me. Meism. And thinking about yourself makes you feel very, very good. But you know what else? It's unbelievably depressing. The whole day to think about yourself. Depression is so popular because it feels so good. Why are so many people sad? Because it feels good to be busy with yourself, but it does hold you back. And at some point, you know what, I got to stop, get over me. Leave me alone, forget about it, it's not about me. And when you do that, you're able to live. The ultimate level of living is developing a relationship with the Eibishter. And that's the meaning of these words. If you get over yourself and you're able to be happy, there's room for the Eibishter in your being. But this is talking about the biggest tzaddikim. We have innumerable stories in Tehillah where A, a person got Nevua because of Simcha. B, a person lost his Nevua because he lost his Simcha. Let's do B first. Yaakov Avinu loses Yosef HaTzadik. We spoke about it before. Yosef's gone for 22 years. And Yaakov is unconsolable. Yaakov cannot accept the loss of his son because Yosef is still alive. So it says in Torah, for 22 years, Yaakov has no Ruach HaKodesh. Now I promise you, if I had a medical issue, which is Pekuach Nefesh, I would have consulted Yaakov Avinu during those 22 years, and I've been very happy to do what he says. I'm sure I had plenty of Ruach HaKodesh, but it was on a much lower level. When Yaakov meets Yosef, the Pasuk says, Vatchi Ruach Yaakov Aviyah. The spirit of Yaakov comes to life, says Rashi, ChaZaL Ruach HaKodesh. 22 years there was no Ruach HaKodesh, Yaakov Avinu. Hashem wasn't hiding from him. Yaakov's depression, Yaakov's sadness, which means, in other words, Yaakov's feeling of self, kept the Eibishter at bay. When Yaakov Avinu discovered Yosef is still alive, and that preoccupation with himself goes away, all of a sudden there's room for the Eibishter. And the Rebbe said this on Hey Tevis, Chamisha B'Tevis Tosh Mem Zayin. I told it to you at the time. The Sikha that the Rebbe spoke Tuesday, Chamisha B'Tevis, the Rebbe spoke at the end of the Chita, says, Vatachi Ruach Yaakov Aviyim. The Rebbe didn't say it, but it was so obvious that the Rebbe was implying that he lost on some level Ani for Ruach HaKodesh. And when you have Simcha, when the heaviness lifts, the Ruach HaKodesh comes back. The Ruach HaKodesh comes back. Another example of this is Moshe Rabbeinu. It says in Chumash and Rashi that Hashem spoke to Moshe, right? But there's two words that Hashem uses in his speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu. One was the word Vayedaber, and the other is the word Vayomer. Now normally we say Vayomer is sweet, like Seimen Lebeis Yankiv, and Vayedaber is severe. But in Chumash and Rashi says Vayedaber means he spoke directly. Vayomer means he spoke equivocally, not so directly. So Rashi says for 38 years, Moshe Rabbeinu was the leader of the Jews for 40 years. Of those 40 years, for 38 years, Hashem spoke to Moshe during those 38 years with the Lashon of Vayomer, not the word Lashon Vayedaber. When the last of the Yidden who were connected to the Chet Egel died, it says Vayedaber Hashem Elai Leim in the Pashas Devarim, and Rashi says that for 38 years Moshe Rabbeinu was removed from the Eibishter, because he was sad about the fact that the Jews of his generation were dying in the desert, and the next generation would go into Eretz Yisrael. When the last of those people died, the Schechina was Misyachad al Moshe Rabbeinu. In other words, Moshe always had Nevua, always had Ruach HaKodesh. But the level of Ruach HaKodesh he had the 38 years when the Yidden were dying for Chet Egel was reduced. And it's represented by an alternative word, Vayomer, instead of Vayedaber.
So why do we say Moshe spoke to Hashem face to face?
The Pashtus, it was Masaras Hadibris, which is before Chet Egel, before Chet HaMeraglim. The Gzeira was Chet HaMeraglim, which was the following year. Right? That's Bepashtus. Not Bepashtus, I don't understand what it means. Hashem wasn't Meyuchad with Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was in touch with God like you're in touch with your best friend. But this what says in Chumash Rashi, that the sort of the Schechina. By the way, I just want to point out that in our parsha, yesterday's Chitas, you have a few Vayomers. But Derech Klal says Vayedaber Hashem Moshe Rabbeinu. Almost every parsha starts Vayedaber. In Parshas Kisisa, there's a few Vayomers. Vayomer Hashem Moshe Kach Chosamim, Bakteris, and I have notes of classes that I'm going to give one day IYH. And why in Parshas Kisisa there's a few Vayomers before Chet Egel, in yesterday's Chitas. Today's Chitas is Chet Egel, and yesterday's Chitas you have a few Vayomers. But in any case, these are examples to the negative, right? We're the examples to the positive. I think I mentioned to you already. The first example is Yitzchak. Yitzchak wants to give Esav a bracha, so he says to Esav and Rashi, bring me meat and wine. And of course, Rashi says the meat and the wine were because of Pesach, the Pesach Chagiga, but the meat and the wine was also Simcha. Because he needs to have, if he's going to give a bracha, he needs Ruach HaKodesh. If he needs Ruach HaKodesh, he needs Simcha. And ain't Simcha Elam Abasar, and Simcha Elam. Even a big tzaddik, like Yitzchak Avinu, if he eats tasty meat, and he drinks rich, enriching wine, he puts himself into a state of joy, and it allows the Schechina to rest upon him, and is able to give him a bracha. You know from Tanya Perek Zayin, it's a strange Gemara. I should have mentioned this to you when we did item 5, but I didn't mention it then, so I'm mentioning it now. The Gemara says that somebody came and asked one of the Ameroyim a question. What are the important Ameroyim? He says, I can't answer you. He says, why not? I haven't eaten fleshik yet. The fact that I was unable to answer your question, I didn't eat beef, not chicken, beef. I have to eat fat meat, and then I'll get smart. I know when I eat fat food, I get heavy in the head, I get dizzy. But he said when I'll eat something tasty and rich, I'll be smarter and I'll be able to answer you, which is weird, but it's true. Because joy puts you in a state where you're closer to Ruach HaKodesh. You know that somebody Rishonim, I mean the Tam is famous for this. Some of the Rishonim used to keep on their table a pile of gold coins. It helped them think. They were not materialistic, but the symbol of wealth opened up their heads. It gave them joy, and the joy enhanced their Ruach HaKodesh, which allowed them to mechadash chur chadushay Torah, and so on and so forth. And that's the pshat. Ein Schechina sheida ela mitech simcha. The first example is Yitzchak, and the second, again, all this I told you yesterday. The second example is Shaul HaMelech. The Shaul HaMelech was paranoid. It's so sad. I'm on Shaul HaMelech's team, especially this time of year. Shaul HaMelech is the grandfather of Mordechai, right? Ish ben Esther ben Mordechai ben Shimi ben Kish, right? Shaul's name is Shaul ben Kish. Ish Yemini from Shevet Binyamin. So we don't like Shaul HaMelech. B'chlal, I don't know if you know the story. Shevet Binyamin.
Is his grandson?
I think so. Yeah, many generations. Shevet Binyamin was written off the moment they were born. When Binyamin is born and Rachel says Ben Oini, the son of my pain, and Yaakov says no, Binyamin. So we call him Binyamin, but Rachel's name, Shevet Binyamin. At one point there was a civil war. I mean, you know, boys don't learn Tanakh. There was a civil war. The whole nation of Israel against Shevet Binyamin. They killed every Benjaminite except for 400. Okay, if you say 600, say 600. Especially since I heard a couple of holy voices here. They needed one more battle. There was war after war after day. Day after they were killing each other. Imagine, because the Pelegish Begiven. Look up the story. It's so upsetting. It's look up. Take out the book of Judges. Read the last chapters. It'll really, really turn your stomach. In other words, it's a good read if you like disgusting things. It's very, very tragic. And Shevet, the rest of the Yidden came to Binyamin and said, "You got to give out the people who did this. They killed somebody in the most brutal way, cruel and brutal." Yidden. And Binyamin said, "We're not giving them up." So it was a civil war. They almost wiped out Shevet Binyamin. And the last day, in other words, they would have wiped them out. There would be not a single member of Shevet. Someone remembered, wait a minute, if you don't have 12 Shvatim, the Jews are not complete. So they spared those few hundred Chevre. Shaul was one of them. Shaul was physically one of those soldiers. And then a while later he became the king. You know how weird that is? One of the people that couldn't find wives. Nobody wanted to marry them. A whole shtick. How they could get married and have children. But anyway, I feel like Shaul gets a raw deal. He was a very, very, very big tzaddik. He was put in a position, not by his own will, not by his own doing, not by his own anything, and he was held accountable and punished, and maybe should no mercy on Shaul. That's the truth. But anyway.
He decided to go up and done it.
He was trying to kill his own son-in-law. He was trying to kill his own son-in-law.
Yeah, that's his choice, no?
The Abishah made him mad. He was paranoid schizophrenic. He was mad. I don't know, schizophrenic. He was very, very paranoid. I feel bad for him. You know who else felt bad for him? Dovid HaMelech felt bad for him. Dovid HaMelech pitied him. Dovid HaMelech did not hate him at all. Dovid HaMelech killed the person who killed him. Because he killed Mashiach Hashem. Even though killing Shaul was now putting Dovid HaMelech on the throne. And by that point, Dovid had already been anointed. He knew it was his job. But he killed the person who killed Shaul ben Kish. Anyway, so Shaul HaMelech is very depressed. And he wants to get his life back here. So he calls a young musician to play for him. And the musician that he calls happens to be a shepherd who lives near Beis Lechem, whose name is Dovid ben Yishai. And Dovid ben Yishai, who would later become Dovid HaMelech, comes to play for King Shaul to raise his spirits. And the pasuk says, "Vayiyichem menagin hamenagin v'tehi olav ruach havaya." As the musician played, the Ruach HaKodesh comes back. Shaul HaMelech goes out of his sadness and his depression. So again, in plain words, he stops thinking about himself. And there's room for the Eibush in his life. The Eibush to rest upon him. And that's the meaning of this statement. Ein Schechina sheira ela miteich Simcha. The Schechina won't manifest unless there's joy. And it's a fact, right? And we say this about everything. Right? It says in my Mari Chasidus, Ein eimdem l'spalo ela miteich. Very good. Did you see this? It's such a cute thing. A misnagid in the middle of a shiur, does like a 90-minute, someone clipped out of a speech and they put, it's gone, as they say, it's gone viral. What did he say? He said that a man walks up to him a couple of days ago and says to him, V'ha'ir Shushan, finish the pasuk. So he says, Navoicha. So he tells them, you're a misnagid. He says, every misnagid, Shushan says Navoicha. Every chos, Shushan, Shalom is Navoicha. It's gewaldig. It's a litmus test. There's 2 Ha'ir Shushans in the Megillah. If you're a chassid, you automatically say Tzov Samecha, like our Levi here. Anish, Ha'ir Shushan, Navoicha. It's a fact. The people's reactions are incredible. Now why am I saying this? What was I just saying?
Something about happiness.
Yes. So there's 2 pisgamim. Ein dem l'spal ela mitech simcha. Ein dem l'spal ela mitech kevidrash. Go over to a person, ein dem l'spal ela. So most people know mitech kevidrash because there's a mishnah. Mitech in brachas, which you learn in school when you're still paying attention. Ein dem l'spal mitech simcha is a gemara. It's not a mishnah. So for that, it's not exactly the same. But still, ein dem l'spal mitech kevidrash. Ein dem l'spal mitech simcha. Then it says v'chein ledvar halacha. The Maimonides bring that when you daven you have to have simcha, when you learn Torah you have to have simcha, and when you do a mitzvah you have to have simcha. The Maimonides bring proofs from all over Shas that when you do a mitzvah, when you daven, you learn Torah, when you're learning Torah, when you're davening, you have simcha. Why? Because when you're doing religious activity, trying to connect to the Eibishter, you want to connect to the Eibishter, you got to get out of the way. The only way you get out of the way is to get over yourself. The only way to get over yourself is to be happy. And when you do all of those things, your Torah connects you to Hashem, your Tefillah connects you to Hashem, and your mitzvah. So if you approach davening and you're all fachmarat, you're self-absorbed. So you're the barrier between your own prayer and the Creator. When you're learning Torah and you fachmarat, all you come away with is ego. The godliness of Torah escapes you. You want the godliness of Torah to get over yourself. And the same is true in mitzvahs. And that's the meaning of Ein HaShechina Sheira Ela Mitech Simcha. Any questions or comments? I got 11 minutes and one more item. This is number 13 or 14, the bottom of the page. Amalem HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael, God Almighty, tell the Jewish people, Ha-simcha na lachem. And I wrote in English, joy is becoming of you. For a year to be happy is beautiful. This is what it should be. Ha-simcha na lachem. I put it at the bottom of this list. I could have put it at any other place. I chose to put it at the bottom of this list because I'm the manager of this list. I made the list. I didn't write the words, but I decide how I want to interpret them, right? Some of them are says in Sfarim. What does this mean? Ha-simcha na lachem. So I'm going to share with you my insight. Okay? My insight is as follows. The Rebbe has a sikha. There's many sikhas, but one sikha in particular. And the Kuta sikha is chelik tezayin. It's a Purim cotton sikha, where the Rebbe discusses simcha. And he juxtaposes, he compares and contrasts simcha as it's found in Rambam and simcha as it's found in the Shulchan Aruch, in the Ramo, the Ar Shulchan Aruch. The Rebbe makes a proposition, or a supposition, a preposition or a supposition. And the Rebbe's proposition is that the Rambam wrote a Geula Shulchan Aruch, and the Tur, and then the Beis Yosef, and then the Alter Rebbe wrote a Geula Shulchan Aruch. The Rambam is the only Mechaber who wrote Shulchan Aruch on the whole Torah, Kol Torah Kula. In other words, he even wrote mitzvahs, which we don't have in Zman HaGolos. We're all going to have a Mashiach come, and write the whole Torah. And because he wrote the whole Torah, it's a Geula Dika Torah. His approach is a Geula Dika Torah. The Tur, whom I think modeled his Allah Sefer after the Rambam, but he didn't write. He doesn't have Yudal. He doesn't have 14 books. He has 4 books with a very, very different order. It's, I think, he modeled it after the Rambam, but he did it differently based on the fact that he had a different endeavor. He wrote a Geula Shulchan Aruch. So the Rebbe says one of the differences between a Geula Shulchan Aruch and a Geula Shulchan Aruch is, in a Geula Shulchan Aruch, Hashem is more revealed, but the essence of the neshama is more hidden. In a Geula Shulchan Aruch, Hashem is less revealed, but the essence of the neshama is more revealed. And the example that the Rebbe brings is Simcha. Where does the Rambam talk about Simcha, and where does the Rambam talk about Simcha? The Rambam talks about Simcha in Hilchos Sukkos. That a Yom Tov, a person has to be happy, be happy, right? And that Rambam writes at the end of Hilchos Sukkah that Simcha is avodah gedolah, serving Hashem with joy is a very hard job. It's a very important job. It's a serious, important undertaking. Avodah gedolah means A, it's hard, B, it's important. And the Simcha that the Rambams talk about is called Simcha Shel Mitzvah, the joy of Judaism. What am I happy about? That I'm a Jew. I can keep Shabbos, I can keep kosher, I can do tshuva. Simcha Shel Mitzvah. Where does the Ramah put Simcha? In Hilchos Purim Cotton, not Hilchos Purim. Hilchos Purim Cotton. What's Purim Cotton? Purim Cotton is nothing. You don't say Tachna, that's what Purim Cotton is. The last Hilchos Purim is the end of Hilchos Erech Chaim. After Hilchos Purim Cotton, at the very, very end of Erech Chaim, the Ramah closes the Erech Chaim with the words Toiv Leiv Mishte Tamid. It's a pasuk. A Toiv Leiv, a person with a good heart, is Mishte Tamid. He's always a little freilach, a little shikin. Now the Rebbe points out, and this is brought by many Mechabim and Sfarim, that there's two Tamids in Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch begins with Jewsih Hashem Lenegdi Samid, and it ends with Toiv Leiv Mishta Tamid. Always the Eibush is in front. It's two Tamids. Toiv Leiv, Jewsih Hashem Lenegdi Samid. In front of me is Hashem all the time, and it closes with Toiv Leiv Mishta Tamid. So the Rebbe juxtaposes the Ramah and the Rambam. The Rambam puts Simcha in the end of Sukkah, and it connects it to mitzvahs. The Ramah puts Simcha and then they put him cotton, and it connects it to what? To Tamid. You got to always be happy. So the Rebbe Zal Gezunz, and our Rebbe says a Chiddush. The Chiddush that the Rebbe says is that there's different kinds of Simcha. You can be happy about this, you can be happy about this, yeah? Then there is happiness for no particular reason. The Rebbe calls it Simcha b'Tahara, unadulterated joy. Joy for no reason. Random joy. Happy about nothing. I'm alive, I'm happy. Finish. It's good enough for me. Unconditional joy. Simcha for no reason. To use a paraphrase, one of the Hayom Yom says that there's serving Hashem with an emes, and emes alein is an avodah, right? There's serving Hashem with truth, and the truth itself is a service. So the Rabbi am right. You shouldn't think that truth is a means to serving Hashem. Truth is a form of service. The same is true here, right? There's Dina dem Eibishter misech Simcha, and Simcha alein is an avodah. There's serving Hashem with joy, and then there's the service of joy. It's called Simcha b'Tahara, unadulterated, unconditional joy. Joy happens for no particular reason. So I want you, the Rebbe spoke about Salat. In Tafshin Memches, 1988, I was not here, I was in Russia. Pashas Kiteitze, the Rebbe sang the whole niggin. We got regards from Russia. Echtin Turin Marka. The Rebbe sang the whole song of Verbringen. And in that Verbringen, the Rebbe talked about Simcha. And the Rebbe said, we need to bring Mashiach. And to bring Mashiach, you have to do something. And we're trying all kinds of tricks. And the Rebbe mentioned a number of different tricks that people have tried to bring Mashiach, including being Deichek Esaketz. But the Gemara says, you're not allowed to rush Mashiach, you're not allowed to be Lalu B'choyme, you're not allowed to conquer Eretz Yisrael, but there's Gimel Shvuos. But the Rebbe apparently holds that those Gimel Shvuos are not L'halocha. The Rebbe says there have been Gedeli Yisrael who tried to rush Mashiach, Deichek Esaketz, and they gave two examples in the Sikha. One is the Yosef Di L'Rainu, who lived hundreds of years ago, and the second is the ChaZaL Milublin. 2 years after Alter Rebbe passed away, the three biggest Paltiel tzaddikim tried to bring Mashiach, and it worked out very bad. It really worked out. All three of them were gone within the year. Passed away that year. The Koshen Samagid, the ChaZaL of Lublin, and Nachman Leveriminov.
What happened?
They were messing with. You try to bring Mashiach, there's a lot of opposition, and they didn't calculate right. What happened was that they planned to do it Simchas Torah, and one of them passed away before. And the other two didn't have, they knew everything, right? These people that opened Ruach HaKodesh, this Hashem hid from them. So they went to work Simchas Torah, handicap. And the ChaZaL was weird stuff. Really, the Kodsh Magid passed away out of Shuas. The Rimon passed away Lamed Dal Ba'omer, the day after like Ba'omer. And the Lublina passed away Tisha B'Av. But that whole year was a disaster. They tried to bring Mashiach, and it didn't work. Huh? You want to hear the story? I'll do it after 9 o'clock. I got 4 minutes. I'll be happy to tell you the story, but I got to finish my point. So the Rebbe said, we found Yidnu Deichek Esaketz, and they knew the Gemara in Ksubis. So apparently, rushing Mashiach, which the Satmar scream is the biggest event in the world, is conquering Eretz Yisrael. The second way is rushing Mashiach. Not supposed to rush Mashiach, let Mashiach come in due time. And the Rebbe brought the eyes from Gedeli Yisrael who did it. And the Rebbe said, there's one thing we never tried. Bringing Mashiach through Simcha. Simcha b'tahara. Just be happy to bring Mashiach. That's it. And the Rebbe actually said in that Fabrengen, B'chanunina b'zayis. I dare you, try me out. See if it works. Imagine every chassid who walks around happy all the time. Why Mashiach's coming? That's kind of weird, yeah? But listen, we're weird anyway. Might as well be happy weird, right? What's the difference? What's a happy drunk and a sad drunk? Huh? They're both drunk, right? But one is pleasant and the other is intolerable. You can be a happy weird. So the Rebbe said, we should be b'simcha to bring Mashiach. There was a Yid who unfortunately died very suddenly, a very beautiful Jew. His name was Kuti Rap. You can seal it up. He was a chassidish Yid till the last bone. And this was his mitzvah. So he always talked about being b'simcha. So he would do all kinds of simcha projects. L'mashal, they do Kiddush Lavana. But the Rebbe spoke Kiddush Lavana in Pashas Deich, Toshim Nun Beis. The Kiddush Lavana has to be done with a lot of simcha, beach to the cave, is welcome. So they put a band, that's one of his pa'ulas. Chedesh Adar in 770, every night there's music. He's already an Elam Emes, but from the other side, he's sending over here music. He was into this business of simcha. Because the Rebbe said, B'chalal, especially in Adar, in Nun Beis, Rebbe spoke about Adar, simcha brings Mashiach. And this is not simcha for a mitzvah, it's not simcha for a tshuva, it's simcha for no reason. Simcha b'tahara. And the Rebbe explained that in earlier times in history, the yechidah shebenefesh of a yid was more covered over. So simcha needs a reason. Can't be simcha for nothing. In later generations, when the neshama is lower, the yechidah emerges more, and you can have simcha for no particular reason. Which is why in the Rambam, you have simcha shel mitzvah, and in the Ramah, who was later and he lived in a darker golus, you have simcha b'tahara. And that's how I'm interpreting this last piskam. Omer Hashem HaKodesh Baruch Yisrael, Hasimcha Nolachem. God says to the Jews, joy is becoming of you. Why should a Jew be happy? The answer is, he's Jewish. There's actually a video of a Polish Yid coming to Rabbi dollars. And he tells the Rabbi, obviously this Yid was broken. He didn't come to play games. And he says, somebody told me that the Lubavitcher Rebbe is very into Simcha. And the Rebbe says, yeah. Finvus. From what? What's there to be happy about? And again, you have to assume this man was rather tzibrochen. And the Rebbe says, was haste. Bistachayid. What do you mean? Why? You're Jewish. That's enough of a reason. And that's how I'm translating this last entry. Simcha needs no reason. You're a Yid and you're alive, you're Freilach. End of story. Now the story with the three tzaddikim is as follows. They were the opponents of the Alter Rebbe in the war with Napoleon. They wanted Napoleon to win. And they wanted Napoleon to win because they felt they're going to bring Mashiach. And Napoleon is not going to have a chance to make Yidden frei as he had hoped. So Tovkuf Ein Hed, the Alter Rebbe passed away in Ein Gimel in 1812, 1813, 1815. 1814, 1815, they made a deal that Simchas Teda, the three of them are going to work together to bring Mashiach. The Kodesh Magid passed away Erev Sukkot that year, and the ChaZaL, who knew everything, didn't see that. Simchas Teda at night, he told his wife that he's going to sit down and meditate, and she has to look at him, and she should not take her eyes off him even for an instant. So we sat down under a window. It was a small little window, and the window had a row of empty beer bottles. It was Simchas Teda, the Chassidim were drinking beer. And he goes into this meditation, and he's sitting there for a very long time, and she's doing what she was told, just staring at him. But after hours of staring at him, there was a lot of noise. She turned away for a split second. When she turned back, she saw a hand reach into the window, pluck him out of the window, and he disappeared. And the bottles remained standing on the window. There was no way for a person to fit through it. The bottles remained. So they went to look for him. They found him a few hundred amis from the Beis Medrash. Someone had thrown him. Every bone in his body was broken. The ChaZaL. And when they picked him up, he said, I didn't know that he passed away. I mean the Kodesh Magid. If I had known, I would never have tried. And he said the Kodesh Magid came from Elam Emes. He had passed away a week earlier, and he took the tail of the bottom of his kapota, and he put it underneath my body to muffle the fall. Otherwise, I would have died on the spot. The Misnagdim heard about this, and they started saying L'chaim, that because they hated him. The Lublina was a big, powerful tzaddik, and they were very happy that he's ill. And the Lublina said, when I pass away, you won't even be able to drink water. He passed away on Tisha B'Av. And the third tzaddik was Rav Nachman Mendel of Rimenov. He had a very interesting story. His interesting story was he had a Talmud named Rabbi Ropshitzer, a Talmud. Rabbi Ropshitzer was on the Alter Rebbe's side. He disagreed with his Rebbes. He was a Talmud of the Rimenever, the Kosher and the Lubliner, but he agreed with Alter Rebbe. So a couple of years before, the Rimene Rebbe was baking matzahs at a Pesach in the afternoon. Every time he puts a matzah in the oven, he says, 500 Russians should burn. 500 Russians should burn. So every pound of matzahs, something between 35 and 5,000 Russian dead, depending on the size the matzahs were, you know. And 500 Russians should burn. 500 Russians should burn. The Ropshitzer sees this. He runs over to the oven, takes out the matzahs, and throws them on the floor, and says, "Nein, Rebbe, absolutely not. Napoleon is tumah. Napoleon is tim. He's not allowed to win." Anyway, the Ropshitzer was against his Rebbes, and he sided with the Alter Rebbe. Rabbi Nachman Mendel in Imman passed away on Lag BaOmer. He passed on Lag BaOmer. That night, the Ropshitzer, his Talmud, laid down on his Rebbes. You know the two meaning of a shtachus? The root of the bush, like a rug, like a shatiach. He physically, his Rebbe's goof was laying on the ground. When a person dies, you put them on the ground facing the door, feet first, and he laid on top of his tzaddikim. Don't try that at home, yeah. And he said, "The Rebbe of Mashiach came." The Rebbe had passed away many hours before, and the Rebbe opens up his eyes. He says, "Naftali azicha gavalt astinish galost." When I wanted, you didn't let. They told him Naftali Ropshitzer. Azicha gavalt astinish galost. When I wanted, you didn't let. He said, "Jetzt darf man ankommen zu kuppen ne knepp und grüne Werden bis Mashiach kommt." We're going to have to go through brass buttons and green worms before Mashiach comes. And people say that this is the Nazis. Kuppen ne knepp und grüne Werden bis Mashiach kommt. So that's the story. Three tzaddikim trying to bring Mashiach. This Rimon of a Rebbe said, "Soll man gehen bis die Knie in jüdische Blit." We should walk till our knees in Jewish blood. Mashiach should come now. That's what he said.
Why is it so difficult to bring Mashiach? Not difficult. Why is it this thing that can't happen?
It's the end of the world. Mashiach means there's no evil.
So if there are people that have the ability to do it, why doesn't God want it?
They apparently didn't have the ability to do it. And you should know, you want to know what's unusual about the Rebbe. The Rebbe made it very clear that Mashiach is a public effort. It's not a tzaddik or two tzaddikim, three tzaddikim. It's every one of us does our part to bring Mashiach. And he suggests that one of the ways to do it is by being besimcha. We shall now daven Shachris. You've been a wonderful audience.